All right, guys, my special guests tonight are Matt Parker and Mary Lee Taylor. They are coming on to discuss Railroad Workers United and this strike that, well, what we were thinking would happen, this issue that has happened with the railroad workers in the United States. I want to thank both of you so much for coming on, and I want to give you a chance to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself. So we'll go ahead and start with Matt.
Hi, Sabrina. My name is Matt Parker. I live in Northern Nevada. I have worked for the railroad for 19 years now, both as a brakeman conductor and now as a locomotive engineer.
Awesome. Mary Lee?
My name's Mary Lee Taylor. I recently retired after working on the railroad for 34 years, 33 of which about was as a locomotive engineer, hauling freight from one city to another. First in the southern part of this country, and currently I was at the BNSF out of Chicago, and I live right by Chicago.
Awesome. So I'm pretty sure both of you are aware to what has been going on with railroad workers. Recently, there were issues with the contract and trying to reach an agreement there. I want to get your take on this in reference to especially the sick leave, because this was new to me and I was really surprised when I first heard about this. I believe it was about a month ago, the first time I talked about it. I was surprised that railroad workers in this country were not basically guaranteed sick leave. And I want to hear from both of you. What do you feel, or how do you feel about the requests that were being made by the workers? And how do you feel about just not being guaranteed sick leave in this country? And I'll go back up to Matt.
We did a show the other day, and Mary Lee kind of let it off very good, talking about how there was a point in time on the railroad, she had said, where if you even brought up sick leave, or excuse me, if you even brought up attendance policies, you'd be laughed out the door. And this is kind of what's at the crux of the issue right now, is these draconian attendance policies that the railroads have added that leave us almost no opportunity to take any time off for family time, for sickness, for anything. When I hired out with the railroad, unless it was really excessive, the railroads didn't care if you took time off. It was not the issue that it is now. What's happened here is, particularly within the last 4 to 5 years, with the implementation of this sham business model that the railroads are using now, that they call it, nothing to do at all with either vision or scheduling. It's all about extracting profit as they can to return to the shareholders. They've cut the workforces down now to where they don't have enough people remaining to handle the current demand of freight. And so their response to that has been to try to clamp down the screws and make it so that we can't take any time off without facing the threat of discipline, up to and including being dismissed. And it's just created an untenable situation now for these. It's disenfranchised the workforce. It's created a lot of dissent. And that's really what's at the core of the issue here.
Yeah, Mary Lee, I'm curious here. I'm really trying to understand like how workers can go this long, like so many years, and not being able to have sick leave, particularly during the pandemic. Knowing we just had a pandemic in this country, I couldn't imagine not being able to take that time off. Some of the people that have been sick during the pandemic, they've been out for like a week. Mm-hmm. And so I can't imagine. One of the things that has been brought up, and hopefully both of you or one of you can clear this up for people tonight. One of the things that has been brought up, if I'm going to play this clip as well, some of the workers have said that they did want paid sick leave, and that the union leaders were not doing what they asked for. They went against what the workers wanted. I do know that this can happen sometimes in unions, but I think where people are a little bit confused, it just seems like, why would the union leaders go against that? Like the paid sick leave, like I feel like this has been a big mess politically, leaving this up to Congress or the Senate or Joe Biden, as you put it as well, to determine the contract. And those of us who are very much like involved in politics, or we are very critical of the political system in our country, we're looking at this from afar and we're saying there is no way the Senate is going to pass the paid sick leave. What do you think may have happened there?
Well, I really can't speak to that directly because I operate within one union. Of course, I talk with coworkers and other workers who are in the different rail unions. But I can't speak to the ins and outs of it. You don't have enough time in the day for us to even begin to discuss how we arrived at this point. But I will say that the fact that we're even talking about this today in terms of sick leave and paid sick time shows how important it is for us to explain to the American public in its entirety the kinds of conditions that we work under, the draconian attendance policies that are forcing illness upon us, forcing us to work sick, forcing us to work tired, when we can't even get unpaid leave. We can't even take off without getting paid. So that's the real question. Time away from the railroad, the time that we deserve and need in order to live our lives and to recharge physically, mentally, and every other way. So I'm glad it has come before the public, because that's how ultimately we're going to win this. It's not going to be by either political party. It's going to be by us mobilizing ourselves and our allies, of which we have tens of millions right today. We haven't attempted to mobilize them, but we see through all kinds of other independent activities that people are organizing in towns and cities across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we're beginning to even build the webs, the networks that we can really do better, because our natural allies, excuse me, my cat's sick. Our natural allies are environmentalists. They're the shippers who are getting screwed by the railroads. They're every single worker in this country, and anyone who's fighting for human rights, really, for working people.
And Sabrina,
I hear you.
If I can add to that, there was a real simple fix to this part of the issue, and that was when President Biden appointed the Presidential Emergency Board to hear arguments from both sides. When we reached the point where we were at self-help back in September, one of the requests from the unions is that these attendance policies be thrown out, and that any future attendance policies with the railroads be required to be collectively bargained. That's not an unreasonable request, and that could have fixed a lot of it. Somewhere that fell off the face of the earth, and it morphed into this deal that the last minute deal that was made with the administration to provide three occurrences that railroaders could have without being disciplined in a year, that had to be scheduled at least 30 days in advance, and could only take place on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. That's absolutely absurd. And then it came down to this 7 paid days of sick time that was under consideration in Congress. The simple fix would have been to say, okay, from now on, we're going to collectively bargain this. But like I said, somewhere that fell off the face of the earth. And now this whole situation has just become part of the general discontent of the entire workforce, as we've seen the systemic destruction of our workplaces over the last several years through this business model that I made reference to before.
That's right. That's right. I have a question for both of you. Do both of you have children? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, with no paid sick leave, and this is something like some of my coworkers have gone through before as well. I don't have kids, but they brought this to my attention, is that they would actually save up their sick days just in case one of their kids got sick, because then they would have to stay home and take care of their child. And I never thought about that because I don't have kids. But I'm wondering, like, do either of you have kids, and how would you deal with that if you're not getting like paid sick leave? If you took that time off, then you're just not getting paid.
Well, first, if you are a single parent, what are you going to do? You can't, you don't have any, I mean, it happens and you have to be off. We don't have any provisions even for an emergency to be able to get off like that. We don't have the right, we have no right to any time off out for the railroad I came off of outside of 24 hours in 30 days. So as a single parent, I mean, your life wouldn't work too well doing that. As just a parent, especially, we're at all different pay scales, as it were, dependent on the craft. And if a person normally would work a 48-hour week, we work many more hours usually in freight service, then taking a day off could be absolutely the difference between eating and paying the light bill. So the actual money, the income that workers need should be paid, especially as we're talking about rail workers. We, in our overwhelming majority, work in conditions that affect our health in a negative way. Many of us have sleep issues because we do not work on any kind of regular schedule. The majority of us. We're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, regardless of what the weather is, if it's 20 below or it's 110. We work under these conditions with a ruined circadian rhythm. And the railroad should not only be furnishing us health care without us paying part of that premium, but they should also be giving us the paid time off that we need as we become ill. It's just utterly reasonable, I think, to anyone who lives and works in this country.
Sabrina, my child is grown, an adult, still lives with me right now, but back in late September of 2021, I got COVID and I was required to quarantine, and I was off work for 10 days without pay. It spread to the rest of the house, and my wife ultimately did not make it. She passed away from complications of COVID. She was hospitalized for 25 days, and during that time, I still had to go to work. I still had to get on trains and take them across the state, and we work under regulations that require us now. We cannot have our cell phones on when we're on the train. This is a result of an accident many years ago in which a number of people were killed on a commuter train. So I'm getting on a train and going across the state. And I don't know when I get to the other end of the line if I'm going to have a message from the hospital that her health is worsened or perhaps she's passed away. This was my life for 25 days. And when she did finally pass away, it was by the grace of God, not by the grace of the railroad, that I just happened to be home holding her hand. This is the situation that we have to deal with as railroaders. These are the conditions that we have to work under. And the employees are just fed up.
Totally understand. Well, first and foremost, Matt, sorry for your loss. And this is just this is mind-boggling to me, because I'm thinking back, and we had a labor movement in this country at some point or another. Before I was born, we had a labor movement in this country, and yet, it wasn't until the pandemic where I think more people started to hear about some of these worker issues. But I think for people who have worked some of these jobs where they're not guaranteed sick pay, or they don't have any health insurance, or they're not guaranteed any type of paid family leave, those people, a lot of the waitress, the bartenders, like, they've been dealing with this for years. But it was really interesting to see that even once the pandemic started, and knowing the condition that the country was in at that time, that some of these employers were still not willing to even give their employees a little bit of breathing room, a pass, so to speak. It just goes to show you just how corrupt this country can be in reference to the workers, and how workers are heavily exploited. And it is really disgusting to me. I was talking to my dad about this the other day, about what's happening with the railroad workers, and it's mind-boggling. And I have to say this, and I say this to anyone who's listening. I grew up in a military family. the United States government, if you work for the military, you're guaranteed all of these things. You're guaranteed paid sick leave. You're guaranteed, actually, you take leave, it's like you can take like 30 days at a time. Like you're guaranteed that. You're guaranteed health care. You're guaranteed paid maternity leave. And so it's frustrating to me because I had those things growing up, and to see that why doesn't everybody in this country have it? It's really upsetting because I know that you can have it. And I want to play this clip for you here because there was a railroad worker. Now he went on to CNN and he expressed his frustration to the commentator here. And I want you to hear what he had to say as well.
You voted for President Biden, but now you say you feel like he's turned his back on you. Why?
Well, what we've seen with this great rail strike of 22 that has ended very undramatically is we've seen unionized workers' right to bargain collectively get trampled on. Their voice has not been heard. They voted against a contract. We have a pro-labor president who loves to, pat himself on the back for that. And when the going got tough, he turned his back on the people he's supposed to be looking out for.
And when this bill that is now going to go to President Biden pass the House, it had a separate measure that actually had 7 paid sick days for you and your colleagues. That did not make it through the Senate. They voted against it. Are you asking President Biden not to sign this bill?
It's a good question. You don't go against what your members vote for. So shout out to Jamal Brown for getting that bill going and looking out for us. But the sick days was more of a distraction. The main attraction here is Joe Biden forced a contract on our unionized workers who voted against it.
So this piece right here, this is the piece some people have questions about, that Biden forced a contract on the union workers that did not want it. This is the piece I think some people are confused by, because what I've been hearing is that the union leaders were the ones that made the agreement, but he's saying that the workers did not want it. And I want to hear from both of you about that, your opinion about that.
Well, the vast majority of organized labor on the unions, of which there are 12 in our bargaining coalition, 55% voted these contracts down. None of the unions who voted it up did it by the margins, by great margins. For example, the union I was in, it was 53.5% for the contract. Almost half, a little over half, and almost half voted no. So there's a lot of sentiment against this contract either way, and democratically we voted it down in our unions. And we have every right, as other people have said, we have every right to insist that any vote that we carry out in our unions, which we fought to get, that vote be respected. It means nothing to vote in a union. It means nothing to have a union if if what we can see in the future is direct government intervention, squarely on the side of the carriers, as it has historically every time it's intervened in any labor dispute. It has sided on the side of the employers. We're not looking for help in that manner from the government. We're looking to wage our own fight and the government to get out of the way. And I agree with the speaker on CNN that if Biden had been, in fact, a pro-labor president, he would have vetoed that bill because it was not good for labor, and labor voted and spoke, and he did it anyway.
Well said, Mary Lee. Matt, what's your take on this as well?
With regard to what Mr. Murtaugh said, I think you can count the administration's and Congress's actions in this as one of their biggest policy failures. We have seen for a number of years now railroad workers walking away from these careers in numbers that we've never seen before. The railroad industry used to be a place where people clamored to get in the door and they stayed with it once they were in because it comes with a very good retirement benefit, and it was generally a good job. And now we've seen workers walking away from these jobs, and what potentially is going to happen as a result of this unpopular agreement being forced on us is that may accelerate. And if it does, with the workforce that's already stressed, if we lose even more workers in the coming days, which certainly could potentially happen, then the long-term effect of the result of these actions may not be as drastic as a strike, but it's going to be felt for a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer to fix, and everybody's pay. The administration and Congress had a chance to take a situation. And again, the rail dispute here is just one symptom of this systematic destruction of the rail industry for several years, putting Wall Street above everything else. And the administration, Congress had an opportunity, a golden opportunity here to address that as well, by settling this dispute in a way that was favorable to the workers and could send a message to the management of these railroads that what they're comfortable. And they totally blew it. And so now again, we may see long term some very detrimental effects in this on the railroad industry. They took a situation and potentially made it much worse.
So just so I understand, because there's already been debates about this this week. Just so I understand, Mary Lee, you were saying that I think it was like 55% that voted it down.
Yes.
In that sense, when the union leaders went to make the agreement, they were going against what the workers wanted.
Well, I wasn't there. Are you talking about the final ones with Biden and Walsh and those people? I mean, I wasn't there. It was unclear. I thought there was a lot of non-transparency over what had gone back and forth. I will say that it was, I thought, clear, at least on one of the 7 Class 1 railroads, that anything that was less than a negotiated attendance policy that allowed us to actually take time off was not acceptable. We voted in January to strike over that exact issue, not all by itself, that standalone issue. We were enjoined by a federal judge, which usually happens, and we weren't able to get our story out as much as we should have been able to before other workers and before the public. So we started a little bit further behind than we would have been without the initial government intervention of that judge trying to decide that we could strike over this fundamental issue. So I just want to put that in context. And what how Matt put it is exactly right. There is not going to be what both the Biden administration and I think many of the mainstream pundits have to say about it, that somehow this is it. Well, okay, this is it. It's not it, because the central issue is not resolved. And I too, Matt, am embarrassed to even work on a railroad, having heard your experience about in terms of your illness and your wife's passing. I am deeply sorry for that. But it's not going to change, because they're going to keep doing it. The greed, the unconscionable greed of these railroads is destroying not only our lives, but the actual railroads themselves, as Matt so eloquently already spoke to. So the core issue is not going away. It's not fading. We will continue to get victimized as workers who take off any time for illness, fatigue, just mental health, whatever. They'll continue to get victimized by the railroads. They'll get terminated. The problems will be exacerbated, and the deep anger that exists amongst the ranks of labor working on the railroad will not fade away until the issues are addressed. That's what we have to, I think, really look at. That's the question. How are we going to come down in a big and broad way on the side of rail labor to keep this raised and to decisively win it? In the short and long term, I'm speaking.
That's right. And one of the, oh, go ahead, Bob, Matt.
Thank you. I can't really speak to the actions of our union leadership because I wasn't there. I don't know what took place, but what I can tell you is that we've gotten used to hearing from our leadership, having deals put before us and being told, well, you better accept this because this is the best that we're going to do. This goes back to the Railway Labor Act that we work under, and a lot of people don't understand because most of the unionized workforce works under the National Labor Relations Act. The difference between the two. The Railway Labor Act was written to prevent strikes. And back at the time that the rail carriers were largely economically deregulated to save them from bankruptcy in 1980, there were, by my count, 45 Class 1 railroads in this country. And Class 1 refers to the size of a rail carrier based on their gross revenue annually. Now we're down to 7, and that number is likely to drop to 6. As the Surface Transportation Board is poised to approve another merger. And what has happened here is these companies have gotten so big through mergers and acquisitions, they're nationalized now. There was a time where if there was a dispute between the unions and the railroads and you struck a carrier, it was not a big deal because there was other routes that freight could take. Now these carriers have gotten so big and there's so few of them now, and they bind together and bargain as a unit that they've used the Railway Labor Act to shield themselves from strikes. And so that act hamstrings us when it comes to seeking self-help. We can't strike, and therefore we become a victim of a game of politics. Who's in the White House? Who controls Congress? And are they likely to give us a good deal or not? And that depends on how far, that dictates how far we're going to push it. On seeking a better contract. And as long as we have to play this game where Congress and the president are the final arbiters, we don't have the opportunity that other unions do to duke it out with the companies and try to get a better agreement. And I'm sure that's probably what this one came down to as well. How far are we going to get trying to push this, and can we get any better? And perhaps that had a role to play in this tentative agreement that was put forth that ultimately was found to be highly unpopular with the majority of the union workforce. I think also too, though, you've got to go back and you've got to look at just the general discontent of workers completely in what they've seen in the destruction of their workplaces and wanting a better workplace. I think there's just this mentality among a lot of the workforce now that they want to fight. They're fed up and they want to fight. And unless you really hand them something good, they're more looking for the fight more than anything else. And when they get frustrated by having a bad deal like this shoved down their throat, this is what I was talking about in terms of now we potentially might see an acceleration of the number of people leaving.
Right. And that leads me into the question about a strike, because all of us watching here, like, we stand in solidarity with the workers. I've had Starbucks unionizers on the show, including some that were fired for trying to start a union. We've had, I'm trying to remember who else came up with Starbucks. There's been a lot of workers that have come on. Starbucks, Amazon, Kellogg's have come on. And I think, they have had these wins in trying to unionize or to try to fix things within the union that they've had. And one of the questions that has been coming up, and I've been wondering this as well, why didn't the railroad workers, why didn't they go on strike? And the reason why I ask is because, is it in reference to maybe not having enough like mutual aid funds like set up or put aside for them to go on strike? Or is it more so they were intimidated not to go on strike? And the reason why I ask is because I've seen a couple of interviews with railroad workers that said that they were prepared to go on strike, but that was a last resort. And my biggest fear when I first heard about this about a month ago, my biggest fear is when I found out that Marty Walsh was talking to Joe Biden and they were going to come in and ask Congress to make the agreement, to make the contract. I said, this isn't going to go well for the railroad workers, because whatever they try to get passed in the Senate, that's actually going to benefit the workers in reference to benefits, is probably not going to pass, either because of Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, or whatever reason, is not going to pass because it doesn't support corporate interest. And so for a lot of us that are watching, and a lot of us came from the Bernie Sanders movement, but we have been very disappointed politically. And we start to see this more as like a top down thing. Like it's the people at the top with the money versus the rest of us for the most part. And we really, like, I think, wanted you guys to go on strike because we wanted you to basically push back against the politics and say, no, you guys have to give us this. We demand it. And I said to myself, well, if the railroad workers go on strike, then maybe the truckers could go on strike with them and support them in solidarity. And then maybe the port workers can join along with the truckers and support them in solidarity. And 1, 2, 3, boom, that's your general strike. And when I talk about a general strike, I'm looking at it from an economic standpoint, that would be the push for the United States government to not just give you guys paid sick leave, but to guarantee paid sick leave to everybody in this country. But I'm curious, like, why didn't they decide to go on strike? Feel free to jump in.
Well, we did decide to go on strike. That's what I'm telling you. We did vote. Every single railroad worker organized by these 12 unions voted that we would bargain together and that no one would accept these in reality, as we coalition bargained, would accept an agreement. So by our majority, the three biggest unions are the conductors union, followed by the locomotive engineers union, followed by these are who they represent generally, followed by the maintenance and way, the track workers. 2 out of 3 of those biggest unions voted against this contract. That is why so the unions representing 55,000 rail work, or 55% of all rail workers, are weighted a little bit because of the membership size of these groups. I'm not saying this well, Matt. Help me out in a minute. So that's number one. When the law was passed in Congress, when Biden intervened and the law was passed by both parties, both houses in Congress, they basically made it illegal for us to then strike under this Railway Labor Act you're talking about. So it's a threat. It's a violent threat against us and our livelihoods were we to take that action. Not dissimilar to Ronald Reagan and the air traffic controllers. The difference being the strength of one or the other. A national group of railroad unionists is much stronger than and much larger in scope than the air traffic controllers ever were. And there are other issues. Mm-hmm. But that's so it's not a simple question. I want to point out we have a very hard and strong and long history of railroad unionists in this country acting in strike actions, as well as coal miners, steelworkers, and others. But the fact that we're not on strike right now, I think, tells me more than anything that the hard work that has to be done among working people of all livelihoods, of all stripes, these struggles we have to be involved. We have to network with them to come to the point where we have some clear understanding. I also think we got to take a step back. A year ago today, if you heard about a railroad worker, wouldn't you? I would think most people would think, oh yeah, that's the one I wave to when they go by. But the issues would not have been any clear at all. So it's a very short time that we've been actually conducting a good fight. And when I think we and other sectors of not just unions, but other social movements begin to act, things can get quicker. I think we can't. I'm with Matt all the way, and I love the way he put it. I wish we were further ahead. I wish that we could move quicker, but we can't determine any pace. We just have to recognize the pace that exists and what's possible to do. But I am so thankful for you allowing us to participate in this, because one of the issues, as I'm sure you know, is the big business media will interview you for an hour and they'll use 25 seconds of the most innocuous things you could say. So our issues don't get out there hard, but they are better now than than I've seen before, ever. That people would be saying, what, you don't have sick leave?
Mhm.
Just it's a much better position. And I think that people like you that enable us to get these stories out are just such a blessing, just such a blessing. And I wanted to thank you for providing us this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And so, so that people understand, like now, legally, you guys cannot go on strike through the union. Is there a possibility of a wildcat strike, or is that a no as well?
Well, wildcat means wildcat. That presumably means nobody would. How would you know that ahead of time if it's something that's not like what we do through the structures that we have? I can't make any predictions. I mean, we continue through with this struggle, and I don't know how all the parts will interact. I think that workers are justifiably very concerned about the legal risk they could be placing themselves, their families, and their coworkers in were they to take any action proscribed by the legal intervention of Biden and Congress enforcing this contract on us.
I
Well
think it's
said.
important. I think it's important to note, Sabrina, just like you said, that this is where we're at. You know, once Congress stepped in and imposed this under the Railway Labor Act, a strike would be illegal, and that certainly could not be sanctioned by the unions, because if it was, then the railroads in turn could and would sue the unions for damages that they incurred as a result of the illegal strike and bankrupt them, and there would be no more unions. That's exactly what the railroads would like. This is the concern going forward in terms of strike. Are we going to see the railroad workers now striking with their feet by leaving? That remains to be seen. But you mentioned solidarity too, and I think that's very important. We've heard a lot from a lot of different labor organizations, other unions and such, that they have our backs on this. And what we're going to find out over the next 2 years is, do they really? What are people willing to do to help us hold this administration and this Congress accountable for their bad choice in this situation? What's going to happen? Is rail labor just going to get kicked in the corner now and become a victim for the greater good? This has been going on for, the better part of 40 years anyway. And again, it's why the workforce is fed up. We're fed up with this. We're fed up with having the same result all the time. We want to see something different. And it makes it very difficult when we can look at all these other unions and see the victories that they're achieving, and then we see how this end up. There's no victory for us in this. So again, it's just it raises the general disgust, and I think as time goes on, everybody from the carriers themselves to the politicians that were involved in this are going to see the damage that's been done for this or by this. And I want to say something else to you too, because you brought up the Secretary of Labor, and I want to tell you something very alarming about Mr. Walsh too. Back in, the State Federation, Nevada AFL-CIO has formed a Transportation Trades Committee to mirror the Transportation Trades Division at the national level. And at our September meeting, that same day of that meeting, union leaders in Las Vegas were having a meeting with the secretary. And a leader from the IBEW asked me specifically in that meeting if there was anything that I would like brought up with the secretary, because being in Northern Nevada, I was not able to be at that meeting. And so I gave him some things to say or to ask. And at our November meeting, he followed up with me and told me that he went to the secretary and asked him about these things and said, what's being put forth right now is that we've averted a rail strike, and we really haven't, because this still has to be ratified by the members. And the secretary's response to this gentleman, within earshot of a number of other labor leaders in that meeting, was, well, this is the best these railroad workers are going to get. If they don't accept it, then Congress is going to step in and impose it. And that was not the answer that these people were looking for, but it was the answer that was given. So with that, it should be no surprise that's what Secretary Walsh ended up doing, is asking Congress to intervene. And that certainly was of zero help to us whatsoever. So again, what are we going to do going forward to hold these people accountable? That's the question.
Well said. Absolutely. Yes. Marty Walsh was my former mayor here in Boston, and he touted himself as a big pro-union guy. And so to see him step in and do this, I was just like, you're not pro-union. Like, this is ridiculous. I personally don't think it is right for the government to step in and to tell employees, particularly any union, that they cannot go on strike. I think it's ridiculous. But something that could be done is that even now, Joe Biden, by executive order, can still make sure that you have those sick days. And so I did see there are a couple of protests that have been happening in support of the railroad workers. And for those of you guys listening, if you see those in your area, you got to support them. Like, we really need to put that pressure on Joe Biden. Congress is a lost cause. I'd say at this point, we've tried to reach out to them multiple times. They won't come, with the exception of Ro Khanna, they will not come onto independent media. So it's just, it's really frustrating, but I did want you guys to know, like, we do stand with you. We stand with the workers, and we totally get it. And I wish you guys like the best of luck, because I do think it's another 2 years when this comes up for negotiation again. Okay. Yeah. So everybody remember that another 2 years, this comes up for negotiation again. And so, but before you go, I do want to ask both of you, what else can we be doing to help you, to help the railroad workers?
Well, I think one thing that can be done is to come to our website and check out who we are, railroadworkersunited.org. We have current news every week. We have hardworking people that put out labor news. It's available every week. It's like having a library. You can find different things in it. So I just want to encourage everyone to come to the website, donate if you can. We are always facing expenses, and join any activity, as you already said, Sabrina. Join these activities, support them, join them, bring your own sign, be a part of it. As this will continue to be in the news or not. We need to make sure that our issues, however, get before our people. And by our people, I'm talking people who live and work in this country. Those are the people who are our most important friends and allies that we can fight together with. So talk it up in your churches. Explain what these issues are. Be willing to stand up and tell the government that I can live. I can get presents for my kids some other way. I don't need to destroy other lives to do that. The big boogeyman lies that they kept raising. Get involved in your, whether it's your PTA, your school, whatever, and become a part of the living, continuous conversation that we need to have if we're going to be able to move ourselves forward and our allies across the board forward. So thank you for that, Sabrina.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
The key, I think, is solidarity. Come out and support us. And already we've seen some of that with some rallies that have taken place and everything. And that's what we need, is just people to stand behind us. This fight with the rail carriers is bigger than we in the industry could take on. We need a bigger force. And the more that we've had the opportunity to come on shows like this and educate the public about what our issues are, the more we've seen the public get behind us. And that's what we need. Make this a priority. And when you talk to your elected leadership, ask them what's going on with the rail industry and why are they not doing more to support the workers, and just put the pressure on them to do more for us. The Railway Labor Act's got to be amended to give us more power. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere with this. It's going to be the same game all the time. And again, we're seeing now, we live in a different country than we did 3-4 years ago. Societal attitudes have had a major shift, and the railroad's attitude is, well, we've been doing this way for 155 years. Why should we change? You're not going to get people to work in this environment anymore. And the more you put them behind the 8 ball, as they've done with this round of bargaining and the way it's ended up, the harder time you're going to have hiring and retaining people. And this is a skilled trade. This is not something that you can just hire somebody off the street and in a week or two put them out there doing this. It takes a long time to learn how to handle this equipment and not get yourself killed, how to do your jobs in any craft on the railroad. So the loss of workers that could potentially come about as a result, if we continue down this path, particularly not just in this, what's happened here this year, it's going to have long-term effects on the viability of the nation's freight rail system. So this is very important. Just get behind us and focus on how we can hold these people accountable and change their attitudes and change the outcome down the line, because there's a risk here for not just the workers in the rail industry, but the entire country as well, that relies on this freight rail system that's falling apart.
That's right. That's right. Thank you both so much for coming on. Guys, again, please be sure to visit their website. Corey put the link there in the chat, but I want to go ahead and bring it up here as well. Railroadworkersunited.org. Please go ahead and visit that website. You can also donate there as well. Matt and Mary Lee, thank you so much for coming on. And I wish you guys the best. You have my email address, so if anything else comes up, if there's any other updates, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on, Sabrina.
Bye. All right, guys. Hopefully that was educational for you. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to them. Definitely make sure you visit that website, guys, when you get a chance. I've already looked at it, so I know what's on there. But there definitely is an option where you can donate and you can help them out. It's interesting. Like, we have to hear these stories, you guys. We have to hear them. So make sure you share that information with people as well. It's a damn shame. 2022, and we still can't guarantee sick leave for people in this country. It's ridiculous. I'm going to go to some of these comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Lorez. This is insane. Even if not at all, y'all should strike. Devotion Orange, these asks are so basic, like it should be a given, the minimum. Lawrence says the cost pales in comparison to the truckloads of cash being diverted to the war in Ukraine. McGruff, greed is killing us all. Agreed, McGruff. Jessica, December 14th through December 15th is the yearly railway conference in Delaware. Rally anyone? That's a good thing to bring up, Jessica, for those of you who are in that area, or the Delaware area. I know some of you guys watching are in like that Maryland, DC like area there. And thank you for the super chat, Lisa. If many are going to quit, why not still strike? Yeah. So they did answer that. Like, there's the legalities about it. And thank you for the super chat, Susan. With the rail workers like truckers, let us know how we can help. We are and willing and able. In total disagreement with Biden, a big phony liar, unite. Thank you guys so much for that.